Hi there, this is Marina speaking, and I'm happy to share the story of using APIs in localization with you. So yes, it's going to be localization. Some of you now might be thinking, nah, she's going to tell us of the importance of context and IDs and the professional skills of translators and blah, blah, and we heard this a million times already. Well, not exactly. My speech is mainly about love. Love for your team, love for your resources, and as far as love means caring, caring for time spent unwisely. Also, my speech is about lean production, and the road to Zen. And you might be wondering, where's the API story here? No worries, there will be one there as well, but we should keep in mind that it's only a tool on the road to Zen. Now, what we are going to talk about is as follows. First, I'm going to begin with a few words about cats, and then we are to travel the classic route with the challenge, the action plan, its implementation, and carryouts. You can have a bit of a snooze on the challenge description part because we all have challenges and nobody likes all that crying and suffering. So let's get it started. The term CAT stands for Computer Assisted Translation Tool. CAT tools have significantly changed the way how translators work and manage translation projects today. CAT tools split large documents into segments like phrases and paragraphs, which are stored in a database. This is called translation memory, which means that previously translated material can be reused at any time. Nowadays, CAT tools speed up translators' work and increase their efficiency globally. Some translators report up to 40 or even 60% productivity increase by using such tools. So, CATs help translators do more work in less time, improve translation quality, leverage existing translations, and maintain consistency. Video game localization industry is inevitable without CAT tools, and there is a great variety of them available. Some are free and some are paid, some are web services, and some are desktop ones. More and more video game companies use CAT tools to handle localization workflows, and their vendors might use different CAT tools. Using different CAT tool is not a big at all, since all the formats of the exchanged files are agreed upon way before the actual project kicks off. And what if a vendor needs to deliver hundreds of updates to a client monthly or even weekly? Then the actual traffic of files can be something of a bother. Now I'm going to tell you a tale of two cities. Well, actually, two companies which worked in different CAT tools, and neither of them wanted to switch to their partner's solution. This is a true story, and I wish I could tell you names and titles, but unfortunately we are under NDA. So, imagine a AAA company having a localization team of its very own. This branch is one and only localization hub for all the studios working under the parent title and scattered around the globe. All the in-game texts, as well as all the marketing texts, are localized here. There are 27 languages supported, and the vendors to handle these languages are located in all time zones possible. With millions of words needing yearly translation, the localization team strives to provide the best quality in-game translations while being efficient both in terms of speed and cost. So the goal of localization team is to allocate each language to the best vendor fitting to budget and quality expectations. This ends up with quite a big crowd of different vendors working on one and the same project. Besides, the continuous delivery approach makes it impossible without automated operations. Some of the tasks are sent out 24/7 by a robot to cover the time zone differences. For example, nighttime in Europe is early morning in some Asian regions. So when a European requester wakes up in the morning, they find a delivered package, and this helps to stay lit all the time. On the other hand, the workflow for all the projects and languages should be the same, since all the tasks are handled in one content management system, WordB. And not only this is a CMS, but a CAT tool as well. And just as any other CAT tool, it's got its own peculiar features. The average task can be from several words to several thousand words, but the workflow should stay the same for all tasks, no matter the word count. This is essential since all the vendors must work in one and the same environment, WordB, as I mentioned. And it goes without saying that none of the CAT tools can be equally convenient for everybody. Some translators are used to Trados, and some find MemoQ handier, and so on. The thing is that different CAT tools act differently in regards to assuring quality of translations, ensuring concordance, and they have different interface, of course. The reasons for Allcorrect refusing to work in WordB are pretty obvious. As a vendor, we were limited in rights. We couldn't fully maintain translation memories attached to each project. We couldn't enhance glossaries and distribute rights among our linguists. Basically, it means we couldn't ensure the appropriate level of quality, which is only natural since we were not the owner of the environment. So we preferred to download the files from WordB, handle them in our manner in MemoQ, and deliver them back into WordB. And yes, before I actually start talking about the problem, I need to explain how did we ever realize that something's gone wrong. So what was there on the surface? We had lots of requests coming our way daily. Literally, it means that the production juices were flowing and our revenue was good. But the project managers seemed a bit discouraged. Well, you might say that this is a usual for PM. Let's dig deeper. Now, how to measure a project manager's efficiency. Apart from regular KPIs like the number of projects, the number of claims, and quality actions performed during a month, we have one special indicator at Allcorrect. We call it point for Gryffindor, and I'm hoping for no legal prosecutions here. And it means the complexity of a project. Each project is labeled with some points for Gryffindor, and at the end of month, we can see how hard this or that PM worked. And if we go even further, we can divide a project's revenue by points for Gryffindor. What we get is basically the index of clients' burnout for a project manager. In other words, this burnout index reveals if a PM moves mountain for little money or vice versa. Allcorrect has been maintaining production processes on lean rails for 10 years already, and this case was no exception. We chose Kaizen as an improvement methodology. That time around, you might ask why? Because we needed to introduce improvements ASAP. And to identify the bottlenecks, we started with the Gemba walk and A3 problem solving. Now, this picture shows that the main problems were lots of resources were spent for little money. 33% of all the company's requests belong to client X, that is according to January to May statistics. Client X revenue was about 4.5% of company's total. Average burnout index for client X was 3 times higher than the company's average, and 3.5 project managers were totally dedicated to client X. Now, why? Why is burnout index for this client X was 3 times higher than the company's average? The reasons were just 2. The first reason was the rates. The rates were average, which means that the revenue was pretty tight. And another reason was the number of tiny tasks daily. Well, if the rates was something we couldn't do anything about just because we agreed on the rates way before we started the projects, then the number of tasks was something that we could fight, that we could resolve somehow. And it appeared the biggest problem, which caused hundreds of micro operations and managers burnout. Now, having this full picture, one might suppose that working with client X takes way more than it gives. Well, actually, this is not true. Speaking about numbers, the level of revenue was pretty well on average and big requests, and those were mostly the in-game batches, and only small requests were the pay. What is more, we were really proud to handle localization for big titles, which gave us thrill and chill and excitement and even more thrill on top of that. And of course, the experience of working within neatly managed pipelines and with seasoned localization professionals can be underestimated here. So we didn't even think of refusing to work with this client X. The perks were obvious. What we really needed was optimization. So once the problem was identified, we locked ourselves down in a meeting room for 3 days, and we went through the whole lot of Kubler-Ross stages. And in the meantime, we developed and deployed new processes. So it took us 3 days to measure processes, identify wastes, analyze methods efficiency, and build up hypotheses. So what have we got? Being the main vendor for several big titles and several languages, we found ourselves in a tricky situation. On the one hand, we received up to 100 tasks daily, which means we had a lot to do, and that was great. On the other hand, our workflow was way too complicated due to the client's requirements. As you can see on this scheme, a project manager had to do lots of manual operations. Let's follow the whole process. Once the request is received via email, it needs to be put into our ERP system with all the details. Then we have to check whether the deadline is fine and get back to the client if it's not. If the deadline is fine, we go to word B and accept the task. Then we have to look through the file in search of possible bottlenecks. We call it a pre-translation analysis, by the way. Then we download the file from word B and upload it to MemoQ. Inside MemoQ, we then lock the placeholders and all the unnecessary lines. Then we download and analyze the reference files, if any. And finally, assign a linguist and send them a purchase order. Once the file is translated, we need to goof around with the delivery. First, we do all the necessary checks in MemoQ and get back to the linguist on the alerts. After that, we manually download the translated file from MemoQ and upload it to word B. There we have to run QA and do the round of email ping pong with the linguist again. This is necessary, by the way, since the QA options in word B and MemoQ are different. And only then we can change status of the file in word B and deliver it. Now let's multiply this merry-go-round with at least 30 tasks a day and add the flavor of absolutely non-pronounceable names like MF350 marketing copy /ABC and so on. So all this looked like a perfect freak-out recipe. By the way, the average turnaround time of a small task was 32 minutes at the moment. And if we add all the time spent on communication, waiting for answers, and additional requirements analysis, we'll get the amount not relevant with the revenue. And of course, apart from purely production movements, there is a big chunk of standard work, which is fundamental for lean production in general and for localization in particular. What does it mean here? Standard work means keeping our eyes on changing assets of all kinds, like translation memories updated on the client side, which should be built into our processes. Also, specific concepts, recommendations, updated glossaries, testers' feedback, and all sorts of references to be shared with our teams. And this standard work is something that adds big value to a localizer's job. While if we go back to the previous slide and think about it, looks like the most part of it makes up unnecessary flow of actions aimed at only one thing: maintaining the dialogue of two environments, memo queue and word B. Well, the solution seemed pretty simple. All we needed to do was to standardize the workflow and connect two environments via API. At some point or another, most large companies have built-in APIs for their customers. And if we set up everything correctly, managers will only have to moderate routes from time to time. But it turned out that it's not as easy as it seemed. The thing is that MemoQ and WordB are rivaling environments, and direct API calls are not available between them. Having our focus on MemoQ and WordB and how to deal with them, we completely forgot about another environment that we used daily. This is our ERP system, which is our primary setting where we plan our resources, register orders, track tasks, create reports, store meta information, and much more. And we realized that our ERP may serve a perfect mediator between MemoQ and WordB. All the requests from WordB could land into it and then be sent to MemoQ. And to do the delivery, we would only set up the reverse. So we saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and the road was chosen. But the action plan looked a bit scary because we never set up API routes between two CAT tools before. So we needed to do the following. First, we needed to analyze the APIs of both WordB and MemoQ. We needed to make sure there are sustainable methods of export, import, and processing of files in one of the general file formats, irrespective of the source file. For example, it might be XLeaf or PO or JSON. We also needed not only to develop a concept of secure authorization system using these methods, but also the continuous data synchronization in both systems. In other words, we needed to understand how to use APIs safely without loss of any data. The architecture should be safe and flexible at the same time, and in the long run, it should fit for the other client's needs. What else we needed to do is to learn how to use the transmitted data to form and organize cost accounting inside our ERP, which means that our ERP should be able to create correct orders with all the financial information already there. And all the reference materials from WordB should be transmitted to a long list. And this process should be moderated by a project manager. This moderation is important since not all the reference materials are needed. A task may contain reference materials that we already have, hence unnecessary. And reference materials can be of any sort here, like translation memories, glossaries and style guides, graphical assets, and so on. And so there is no way to identify ahead whether we need those or we don't. So the full development took us 4 months. One of the hardest moments was testing the methods and fixing the import-export methods in WordB. No test servers, no test projects. We did it all on full-blooded AAA projects, and somehow we didn't mess up a single task. Now, several words about challenges. The first one was the documentation on the API methods, and it was not always reliable. After we had launched the whole magic, we bumped into several changes in the work of APIs, and no documentation was updated at the moment. Well, actually, this is no wonder for the rapidly changing products when instructions and guidelines simply can't catch up with the development. We had nothing to do but blind code and work out ways on real projects. For example, the method of preparing xlib files for export, which is one of the basic methods, by the way, in WordB changed 2 times during 1 month without any warning from the side of WordB. Yeah, language codes in WordB and MemoQ do differ. And we had to do some mapping in our ERP to set up relevant connections. Special attention should be paid to the dialects and variants like Portuguese and Portuguese Brazilian, Chinese Simplified and Chinese Taiwanese, Norwegian and Norwegian Bokmål. For example, Norwegian Bokmål is registered as NNB in MemoQ, while WordB uses NNB and O. Those differences come from a simple fact. There are several different language code schemes, and each developer may want to use any of them. Yeah, now I'm not sure everybody here really knows what this is about, so let me explain what fuzzy matches are. So we translate in MemoQ, a CAT tool, and any CAT tool can give a comprehensive statistics on any file. And if there is a translation memory attached to the project, we can see how much of the file has been 100% or partially translated before. Here you can see that almost the whole file has already been translated. It's 1,335 words, which are 100% matches. So the client doesn't have to pay the full rate for those 100% matches. And the so-called fuzzy matches are 75 to 99% translation memory hits. They are usually billed with half the price. All in all, these data are important for cost accounting any request. And to obtain MemoQ statistics via APIs, we needed to semantically deconstruct HTML files, which appeared to be quite a time-consuming job. Now, let me say a few words about import filters in MemoQ. A project is usually a long-lasting adventure. First, the in-game texts are translated, then they may be accompanied by a bunch of marketing materials, then there are DLCs and updates, and all the texts are translated in a dedicated MemoQ project, just one project. And usually, all the translation files have the same structure. So it turns very helpful to have customized import filters and their configurations. A project manager just drops the file into the project, picks necessary filters, and off they go into works. And each project has got its own filters, of course. For example, if we handle 10 titles for one client, and so we have 10 different template filters for this very client. Add there the APIs, and we'll have one more criterion that needs to be customized. In other words, the transferring of data should also be enhanced with the information about the import filters. Not that it was something unbearable, but this point should have been taken care of as well. Yeah, now what we came to in the end looked like this. This is a simplified scheme showing what parts of the workflow got affected by the API. As you can see, much of the data travels has been put on the API rails. Once all the API methods had been set up and settled and tested, new processes reflected in our workflow documentation, and all project managers had been taught, according to Kaizen rules, we needed to measure the changes. So it turned out that the average turnaround time dropped from 32 to 8.5 minutes. It was almost 4 times faster than before. And yes, the typical workflow also simplified because most of the commute was handed down to the API magic. Now that we came to a solution of some kind, looks like we should go back to the challenge description and see the numbers. Well, let's try. Was the number of daily requests a problem? No. The problem lied in the number of operations to handle the requests. Was the revenue a problem? No. You might remember that only the small tasks revenue was not okay. So we knew that taken together with the big tasks, the overall client X revenue was fine. So the biggest problem was human resources spent unwisely. We had 3.5 full-time managers dedicated to one client, and those were our best resources, and we couldn't afford their burnout index to be 3 times higher than the company's average. So now we ended up with only 2 managers fully involved, and moreover, their burnout index dropped 2 times. Yeah, so it took us 3 days to run the Kaizen event and 4 months to go through improvements. And what are the main benefits? First, of course, it's capacity. Basically, it raised at a minimum of 1.5 times. Well, it doesn't mean that we started to handle more requests daily. It just means that we got rid of hassle and panic, and we brought more consciousness into our routine. And we've got some room to play games and take part in conferences. Second, it's the number of manual operations. We could fully deconstruct our workflow and break down all our operations into mechanical and mindful. All the mechanical stuff went to be handled by the artificial intelligence, and the value-added operations were left to humans. Third, we gave birth to the API roadmap. And this was the giant leap for all our further integrations. This adventure resulted in integrations with the other clients' environments, and our clients are grateful for that indeed. Now we have like Jira, Memo Queue, our ERP, Crowdin, and our email client and Skype bot connected all together to have our translations travel the fastest routes towards our clients. And last but not least, we genuinely raised project manager spirits. Do you remember me starting with a few words about love? Yes, I'm in love with my Allcorrect family, and I'm in love with the team who worked on this API challenge. And if it wasn't for love, it wouldn't work out at all. People get demotivated by doing file pushing. They feel useless, and on the contrary, they get so very much inspired once they realize they launch spaceships. Well, probably this point is very hard to evaluate due to its vague worth, but what turns obvious here is that spreading positive vibes adds up to the joy of working with a client and influences the final quality of a product and the cooperation in general. And this influence, of course, can't be underestimated. Now, this is it. If you got any questions, please feel free to raise your hand.